When you first meet someone, everything feels exciting, doesn't it? There's that rush, that spark, the possibility that maybe, just maybe, this could be the beginning of something meaningful. And because of that excitement, we tend to overlook things we shouldn't. We rationalize. We tell ourselves, oh, she's just stressed, or she didn't really mean it that way, or it'll get better once she feels more comfortable. But here's the truth. The way someone behaves at the beginning, when they should be on their best behavior, tells you so much more than you want to admit. It's not about one bad day. It's about a pattern. And when those red flags show up consistently, you can't afford to ignore them. Think about it. If you're dating someone and they constantly dismiss your feelings, that's not an accident. If every time you express yourself, they twist your words or make you feel like you're overreacting, that's not a quirk. It's a sign. If she's disrespectful in small ways, belittles you in front of her friends, or uses sarcasm to chip away at your confidence, you might laugh it off at first. You might say to yourself, she didn't mean it like that. But how many times can you excuse behavior that deep down you know isn't right? What usually happens is we get emotionally invested too quickly, and once our heart is in it, our brain goes to work finding reasons to justify the behavior. That's when we start saying things like, she's passionate, that's why she acts like this, or she's just guarded because of her past. We turn ourselves into detectives, trying to solve her puzzle, instead of being honest enough to say, this doesn't feel good. Let me tell you something that will save you a lot of time and pain. People reveal themselves early. They show you their character in how they handle small moments, in how they treat you when they don't need anything from you, in how they act when no one is watching. That's who they are. And if you ignore it now, thinking it'll change, you'll find yourself months or years down the line realizing you saw the signs but chose to look away. It's a bit like buying a car. Imagine you're at the dealership, you take it for a test drive, and during that drive, the engine makes a strange noise. The salesperson says, don't worry, it's probably nothing. You like the car, so you buy it anyway. 2 months later, the car breaks down completely, and suddenly that small noise costs you thousands. The truth is, the problem was always there. You just didn't want to deal with it because you were so focused on how shiny the car looked on the outside. Relationships work the same way. Those little noises, those subtle signs are warnings. Ignoring them doesn't make them disappear. Now, here's what makes it even more dangerous. The longer you stay, the harder it is to walk away. Why? Because by then you've invested. You've given your time, your energy, your love. You've built a story in your head about who she is and who you could be together. And even if her actions don't match that story, you cling to it because the alternative feels like starting over. But starting over is always better than staying stuck in something that chips away at who you are. I want you to ask yourself, how many times in your life have you known something wasn't right, but you ignored that instinct? How many times did you look back and say, I should have walked away sooner? We've all done it. And we do it because we're human. We want connection. We want love. We want to believe in someone's potential, but potential is not reality. What matters is what someone shows you, not what you imagine they could become. And here's the thing, spotting red flags doesn't mean you're judgmental. It means you're aware. It means you respect yourself enough to say, I don't have to put myself through this. And that's powerful. Because the moment you start honoring those instincts, the moment you start saying no to what feels wrong, you create space for what's right. When you meet someone who truly respects you, you won't have to convince yourself that their behavior is okay. You won't have to rationalize. You won't have to constantly explain away things that sting. You'll feel at peace, not on edge. And that's the kind of relationship worth your energy. So the next time you notice those signs, the dismissiveness, the manipulation, the lack of care, don't sugarcoat it. Don't hope it will magically improve. Don't let your desire for connection override your need for self-respect. Because ignoring those red flags today only guarantees bigger heartbreak tomorrow. When someone shows you who they are, don't argue with it. Believe them. And when you see those behaviors that drain your spirit and dishonor your worth, don't ignore it. Just walk away. There's something we don't talk about enough when it comes to relationships, and that's the cost of staying in the wrong one. We tend to measure relationships by how much time we've invested, how much effort we've put in, how many memories we've built. But we rarely stop to ask the most important question. What is this relationship costing me? Not in money, not in hours, but in peace of mind. Because peace, your inner calm, your emotional balance, that sense of safety within yourself, is priceless. And once you lose it, everything else starts to crumble. When you're in a relationship that constantly drains you, you know it. You don't need me to tell you. It's that knot in your stomach when you hear her name pop up on your phone. It's the feeling of walking on eggshells, never knowing which version of her you're going to get today. It's the endless cycle of arguments that never get resolved, only recycled. You're tired, you're stressed, and yet you keep telling yourself, it's just a rough patch. Things will get better. But weeks turn into months, and months turn into years, and all the while you're paying with your peace. And here's the problem: when you normalize chaos, you forget what calm feels like. You start thinking it's normal to feel anxious in love. You convince yourself that drama is passion, that unpredictability means excitement. But that's not passion, it's poison. A healthy relationship doesn't leave you questioning your worth every day. A healthy relationship doesn't make you feel smaller, weaker, or constantly unsettled. Real love should feel like a soft place to land, not a battlefield. I want you to imagine for a second what life looks like when you're at peace. You wake up in the morning without that heaviness in your chest. You're not replaying the last argument in your head, wondering if you said the wrong thing. You're not bracing yourself for another round of criticism or silence. Instead, you feel light, you feel free, you feel supported. That's what peace looks like. And it's what you deserve. But you can't have that peace if you're with someone who thrives on chaos, who doesn't respect your emotional stability, who feeds off keeping you unsteady. And let's be clear, choosing to walk away from that kind of relationship is not weakness. It's strength. It's not giving up. It's saying, I value myself too much to stay in a situation that destroys me. So many people stay because they're afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over, afraid of what people will think if the relationship fails. But let me ask you this: what's scarier, being alone for a while or being trapped for years in a relationship that chips away at who you are? At least when you're alone, you still have yourself. You still have your dignity. You still have your peace. But when you stay in something toxic, you lose all three. I've spoken to countless people who finally walked away. And do you know what the most common thing they say is? I wish I had left sooner. Not once have I heard someone say, I regret protecting my peace. Because once you taste peace again, once you rediscover who you are without the constant stress and tension, you realize that nothing is worth losing it for. Here's another truth: walking away doesn't mean you stop caring. It doesn't mean you didn't love that person. It means you finally decided to love yourself more. And that's not selfish. That's survival. You cannot build a healthy relationship on the foundation of your own exhaustion. Love isn't supposed to drain you dry. And don't make the mistake of thinking that endurance equals loyalty. Staying in something that hurts you doesn't make you a loyal partner. It makes you a prisoner of your own fears. Real loyalty is mutual. Real commitment is built on respect and care from both sides. If you're the only one carrying the weight, it's not a partnership, it's a trap. I know it's not easy. I know walking away takes courage, but I want you to think of it this way: every time you choose peace over chaos, every time you decide to walk away instead of ignoring the signs, you're not just protecting yourself in the moment. You're building the future version of you. The one who's calmer, stronger, happier, and finally free to attract the kind of love that feels safe. You deserve a relationship where your nervous system isn't always on edge. You deserve someone who adds to your life, not someone who drains it. And if the person you're with can't offer that, then the bravest, most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away. Because protecting your peace is never the wrong choice. One of the biggest traps people fall into in relationships is the habit of normalizing toxic behavior. We excuse it, we downplay it, we laugh it off, we even convince ourselves that every couple has problems, or this is just how love is. But deep down, we know the difference between a normal disagreement and a pattern of behavior that chips away at our self-worth. The problem is, the longer we stay, the more our brain tries to reframe dysfunction as something ordinary. And before we realize it, what should never have been acceptable starts to feel like the standard. Think about the first time she made a cutting remark in front of other people. Maybe it stung, but you told yourself, she's just being playful, she's just joking around. The second time, it still bothered you, but you thought, well, I don't want to be too sensitive. By the fifth or sixth time, you're so used to it that you barely react. You've trained yourself to absorb disrespect as if it's just part of the relationship package. That's how toxic dynamics settle in, quietly, gradually, with you making little compromises to your self-respect until one day you look in the mirror and barely recognize yourself. This is why it's so dangerous to normalize it. Because every time you excuse it, you're teaching yourself to lower the bar. You're teaching yourself to tolerate what once would have been a deal breaker. And the more you tolerate, the harder it becomes to draw the line later. It's a slow erosion of your boundaries. And before long, you're standing in the ruins wondering how you let it get this far. And let me tell you something important. The excuses you make for her behavior don't protect you. They only protect the behavior. When you say, she's just stressed, or she's been hurt before, or she doesn't mean it, you're not actually helping the relationship. You're giving her permission to keep treating you the same way. You're telling her, without even realizing it, I'll put up with this. And when someone learns they can get away with disrespect, they rarely stop on their own. Now, I want to make something clear. I'm not saying that everyone who makes a mistake is toxic. We're all human. We all have bad days. But there's a difference between someone who slips up and owns it, and someone who repeatedly crosses your boundaries, dismisses your feelings, and acts like you're the problem for bringing it up. The former shows growth, the latter shows a pattern, and it's patterns that matter. Ask yourself, if your best friend came to you and described the exact same treatment you're tolerating right now, would you tell them to stay, or would you tell them to get out? It's always easier to see toxicity from the outside, but when you're in it, you start twisting your own reality. That's why perspective is so important. If you wouldn't want this for someone you love, why would you settle for it yourself? And here's the scary part: once you normalize toxic behavior, you risk carrying that pattern into every relationship after this one. You walk away, but unless you recognize how you lowered your standards, you'll find yourself in the same dynamic again and again, because the lessons you don't learn get repeated until you do. That's why it's crucial to stop normalizing it the moment you see it. Because if you let it slide now, it becomes the blueprint for what you accept tomorrow. You have to remember what you allow is what will continue. You're not just teaching her how to treat you. You're teaching yourself what you're worth. And if you keep tolerating the unacceptable, you'll start to believe that this is all you deserve. That's the real danger. The relationship won't just hurt you in the moment, it will rewire how you see yourself. But the truth is, you do deserve better. You deserve respect, kindness, and consistency. You deserve someone who lifts you up, not someone who cuts you down. And you'll never find that if you keep normalizing the opposite. It takes courage to call something out for what it is. It takes courage to say, "This doesn't feel right, and I'm not going to tolerate it anymore." But that's how you break the cycle. That's how you reclaim your self-respect. Because when you refuse to normalize toxic behavior, you make a statement, not just to her, but to yourself, that you're no longer available for anything less than what you truly deserve. So if you find yourself constantly justifying, constantly making excuses, constantly telling yourself it's not that bad, pause. Step back. Ask yourself, if I ignore this, where will it lead me? Because ignoring it won't make it go away. It will only grow stronger. And if you keep normalizing it, you'll wake up one day in a life you never wanted, with a version of yourself you barely recognize. The most powerful thing you can do is stop pretending toxic behavior is normal. Don't explain it away. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't minimize it. See it for what it is and make the choice to step away. Because the moment you stop normalizing it is the moment you take your power back. One of the hardest lessons to learn in love is this: caring deeply about someone does not mean you should sacrifice your self-respect. It's tempting, isn't it, to think that if you just love harder, if you give more, if you bend a little further, they'll see your worth. We tell ourselves, if I hold on, they'll change. If I prove myself, they'll treat me better. But every time you trade your dignity for the hope of being loved, you lose a piece of yourself. And once that dignity is gone, the love you're clinging to doesn't feel like love anymore. It feels like survival. There's a dangerous idea that gets romanticized that love is about sacrifice at all costs. That if you truly care about someone, you should tolerate whatever comes your way. But real love doesn't demand that you shrink yourself. Real love doesn't ask you to tolerate disrespect, indifference, or cruelty. When you start giving up your self-respect just to keep someone around, you're not in a relationship anymore. You're in captivity. And no matter how much you care, no matter how strong your feelings are, that's not the kind of love you were made for. Let me give you an example. Say she constantly puts you down in subtle ways, criticizing your choices, mocking your ambitions, making little digs that leave you questioning yourself. The first few times you defend her in your head, she's just being honest. But slowly, you start doubting yourself. You start silencing your own voice just to avoid her remarks. You stop bringing up your goals because you don't want to hear the sarcasm. Before long, you're not even yourself anymore. You've become a muted version of the person you once were. And all of this is happening because you confused loving someone with letting them dismantle your self-worth. The truth is, respect and love are not separate things, they're inseparable. Love without respect is not love, it's control. And yet, so many people stay in relationships where respect is absent, convincing themselves that the love makes up for it. But without respect, the love will eat you alive. I want you to think about this. The way you treat yourself sets the standard for how others treat you. If you show that you're willing to abandon yourself, respect for the sake of keeping someone, they'll believe it's okay to keep taking from you. But when you stand firm in your dignity, when you make it clear that your respect is non-negotiable, you send a powerful message, not just to them, but to yourself. You remind yourself that your worth is not up for debate. And here's something you might not realize yet. When you give up your self-respect, you don't just lose yourself, you lose the relationship too. Because the version of you therewith isn't whole anymore. You're not showing up authentically. You're tiptoeing, overgiving, silencing, bending. That's not intimacy, that's fear. And fear cannot hold two people together forever. Sometimes the reason people hold on is because they confuse intensity with intimacy. They think that because the emotions are strong, the connection must be real. But love that requires you to abandon your boundaries is not intimacy, it's dependency. It's a false closeness built on the erosion of your identity. And here's the irony. The moment you decide to stand in your self-respect, the fear of losing them suddenly loses its power. Because once you realize you'd rather be alone with your dignity than together without it, you finally see the truth. You're not losing them, you're gaining yourself back. It's easy to think that letting go of someone who doesn't respect you is failure. But the real failure is staying in a place where you are undervalued, unseen, and unappreciated. Walking away with your dignity intact is not loss, it's liberation. And that's what allows you to attract the kind of relationship where respect isn't conditional, it's automatic. So many people underestimate the strength that comes from self-respect. It's not loud, it's not showy, but it's unshakable. It's the quiet confidence of knowing I deserve better than this. It's the calm resolve to say, I will not trade my worth for companionship. And when you live with that kind of conviction, you become impossible to mistreat because you'll never allow yourself to stay where you are dishonored. You can care about someone and still choose yourself. You can love deeply and still decide to walk away. Because no matter how much your heart wants the connection, your soul cannot thrive where your dignity is constantly under attack. At the end of the day, love is meant to add to you, not take away from you. And any relationship that costs you your self-respect is far too expensive to keep. Because without self-respect, there is no real love. One of the hardest things to accept in love is that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away. We don't like to think of leaving as a gift. We think of it as loss, as failure, as the end of something we poured ourselves into. But what if walking away wasn't an ending? What if it was a doorway? What if leaving the wrong person is the very thing that creates the space for the right one to arrive? We stay so often because we're afraid of the emptiness, afraid of the silence, afraid of what it will feel like to no longer have that person in our lives. But what you don't realize while you're holding on is that the wrong relationship is already keeping you empty. It's already stealing your joy, draining your energy, and consuming your time. That silence you're afraid of, it's actually peace. That emptiness you're scared to face, it's actually space. Space for better things, healthier things, things that don't suffocate you, but breathe life into you. Here's the truth. You cannot receive what's meant for you while your hands are still clinging to what isn't. Every moment you spend trying to fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed, every ounce of energy you pour into proving your worth to someone who doesn't value it, is energy you could be investing in building a life that feels good with someone who actually meets you where you are. By walking away, you're not just closing a chapter, you're creating the opportunity for a new one to begin. Think about it this way. Imagine your closet is full of clothes that don't fit you anymore. They're too tight, uncomfortable, outdated. But because the closet is stuffed, there's no room for anything new. Even if someone gave you the perfect outfit, you wouldn't have a place to put it. That's what it's like when you hold on to the wrong relationship. You're so full of what doesn't fit you anymore that you have no room for something that actually feels right. And let's be honest, sometimes we hold on because we've convinced ourselves that this is as good as it gets. We tell ourselves, maybe no one else will love me this way. Or, what if I never find someone better? But here's the thing. If you're in something that constantly hurts you, then better already exists, because almost anything would be better than what you're tolerating right now. That fear of never finding better is a lie your mind tells you to keep you stuck. The reality is, walking away doesn't guarantee you'll meet someone new tomorrow, but it guarantees you'll no longer be drained by someone who diminishes you today. And that's already an upgrade. I've seen people stay for years, hoping the person will finally change, hoping the relationship will suddenly transform into what they've been dreaming of. And then I've seen those same people leave, and within months, sometimes even weeks, they look lighter, freer, alive again. Because the weight of a toxic relationship isn't just emotional, it's physical. It sits on your chest, it clouds your mind, it slows you down. Walking away lifts that weight, and when it does, you realize how heavy it really was. And something magical happens when you reclaim that energy. You start noticing opportunities you couldn't see before. You start pursuing things you'd neglected. You reconnect with friends, with passions, with parts of yourself that had been buried. You begin to glow again, and it's that glow, the confidence, the peace, the self-respect that attracts better love into your life. The kind of love that feels steady, safe, and uplifting. But you'll never see it if you're too busy clinging to the version that keeps you dimmed. Walking away doesn't mean you failed. It means you finally succeeded in choosing yourself. It means you finally understood that your worth isn't tied to how much you endure, but to how much you honor yourself. It means you trust that what lies ahead is greater than what you're leaving behind, even if you can't see it yet. Sometimes rejection is just redirection. Sometimes what feels like the end of the road is really just the universe turning you toward something far greater. You may not believe it in the moment. It hurts too much. It feels too final. But one day, you look back and realize the door that closed was the best thing that ever happened to you. Because without it closing, you never would have stepped through the next one. So don't think of walking away as losing love. Think of it as making room for the love you've always deserved. Don't think of it as giving up. Think of it as giving yourself the chance to start fresh, stronger, and wiser than before. Because every time you choose to leave what drains you, you step closer to what will sustain you. And that's the kind of love worth waiting for. Because sometimes walking away isn't the end. It's the beginning. Boundaries are one of the most powerful forms of self-love, and yet they're one of the hardest things to hold when feelings are involved. It's easy to talk about boundaries in theory, I won't tolerate this. I won't allow that. But the real test comes when you care about someone who keeps pushing them. Suddenly, those boundaries you swore you'd never compromise start to blur. You justify, you bend, you tell yourself you're just being flexible. But what begins as compromise quickly turns into surrender, and before you know it, the line you drew for your dignity has been erased. A healthy relationship will respect your boundaries, not challenge them at every turn. The moment you say, "This doesn't work for me," someone who cares will want to honor that. They may not get it perfect every time, but they'll show effort, but they'll show respect. But when you find yourself constantly repeating the same lines, constantly reminding her of what hurts you, constantly begging for the bare minimum, that's not a partnership. That's you trying to convince someone that your needs matter. And the truth is, if you have to fight to prove your needs are valid, you're already in the wrong place. Think about it. When someone ignores your boundaries over and over again, what they're really saying is, "My comfort matters more than your peace." And if you let that continue, you teach them that you'll accept it. You teach them that their wants outweigh your well-being. And once you've taught someone that, they won't stop taking. The danger is that ignoring your own boundaries feels harmless at first. You tell yourself, "It's just this once." You let the disrespect slide. You let the lie pass. You let the harsh words go unchecked. But each time you do, you chip away at your self-respect. It's never just this once. It's the beginning of a pattern. And soon, instead of living by your boundaries, you're living by their terms. But boundaries aren't walls, they're guides. They're not about shutting people out, they're about keeping yourself safe. They're about saying, "This is where I end, and this is where you begin." They're about making sure that in loving someone else, you don't lose yourself. Without boundaries, you can't have real intimacy, because intimacy requires freedom, and you can't feel free when you're constantly being pushed past your limits. Let me give you an example. Say you tell her, "I need honesty. I need to feel like I can trust what you say." And then she lies not once, but repeatedly. You catch it, you call it out, she apologizes, but nothing changes. Every time you forgive, every time you move the line further back, your boundary loses its meaning, and with it, your trust erodes. That's not you being patient. That's you sacrificing your own stability for the sake of keeping someone who doesn't value the truth. Here's what most people don't realize. Walking away when your boundaries are constantly disrespected isn't just about leaving them. It's about keeping you. It's about holding on to your sense of worth, your inner peace, your standards. Because once you compromise your boundaries long enough, you stop recognizing yourself. You wake up wondering, how did I get here? How did I become this version of me who tolerates so much less than I deserve? And the answer is simply you stopped standing firm. Standing firm in your boundaries doesn't make you difficult. It doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. It tells the world, this is the standard for how I expect to be treated. And the right person will meet you there without hesitation. The wrong person will fight you on it every step of the way. And that's how you know who belongs in your life and who doesn't. Not by how much you care for them, but by how much they respect the lines you draw. I know it's not easy. It's painful to walk away from someone you love just because they refuse to honor your boundaries. But the alternative is even more painful, staying in a relationship that requires you to constantly abandon yourself. That kind of love doesn't grow you, it depletes you. And you cannot build a future on depletion. There's a strength in silence when you Finally, stop explaining yourself to someone who never intended to listen. There's power in walking away without drama, without begging, without convincing. Because when you step away, what you're really saying is, I refuse to live in a reality where my boundaries don't matter. And that's the most powerful statement of self-worth you can make. At the end of the day, boundaries are not about keeping love out. They're about making sure that the love you let in is real, healthy, and safe. And if someone shows you again and again that they cannot or will not honor those boundaries, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for your future is simple. Just walk away.